I woke up to silence and the faint scent of hotel lavender, the kind of artificial calm meant to soothe nerves before major life events. But something was wrong. The pillow beneath my head felt too soft, too unfamiliar. My hand brushed against something that didn't belong. A thick strand. No, several strands. I sat up abruptly, my breath catching in my throat. My hair. My long black hair was everywhere, on the pillow, on the sheets, falling from my shoulders like it had been deliberately scattered. Panic bloomed in my chest as I reached up and felt the jagged remains of what used to be one of my most defining features. It was uneven, chopped, brutal. As if someone had taken dull kitchen scissors to it in the dark. Not a cut. A mutilation. I stumbled out of bed, feet barely touching the thick carpet as I rushed toward the bathroom mirror. The sight that met me was unrecognizable. My reflection had always been something I regarded with quiet confidence. I never flaunted my looks, but I took care of them. I respected my image. Now, staring back was a woman with hollow eyes and shredded identity. Patches of scalp were visible beneath the remnants of uneven black strands. I looked vandalized. There was no sign of forced entry. No noise during the night. I had locked the door. Or at least I thought I had. Trembling, I opened the suite door to the adjoining room where my parents were already dressed, calmly sipping coffee. My mother barely glanced up. My father didn't even flinch. "Good morning, sweetheart," my mother said without a trace of irony. I stood frozen in the doorway, shaking, pointing to the remnants of what they had done. She looked me in the eyes and said softly, almost tenderly, "It was time you stopped stealing the spotlight. Leah deserves this weekend. You'll understand someday." In that moment, I understood everything. This wasn't an accident. It wasn't a prank. It was premeditated, planned, executed with cold precision. The scissors hadn't just cut my hair. They had cut the last thread of loyalty I had ever held for them. My name is Adrienne Monroe. I am 34 years old, an independent interior designer based in Portland, Oregon. For over a decade, I built my career from the ground up. No handouts, no shortcuts, just an unrelenting commitment to crafting beauty out of space. I work mostly in high-end residential projects, often dealing with demanding clients who want perfection and are willing to pay for it. My portfolio includes everything from minimalist penthouses to rustic countryside retreats. I take pride in my eye for detail, my ability to listen to a client's essence and translate it into tangible elegance. People often assume that someone like me must come from an artistic family, a background rich in support and creative spirit. But nothing could be further from the truth. I am 5'8", with pale skin that blushes too easily and dark almond-shaped eyes that often get mistaken for judgmental when I am merely tired. My hair, before it was butchered, was long, black, and thick, falling past my shoulder blades like a silk curtain. I wore it in a low chignon most days, paired with neutral-toned dresses, clean lines, high-neck blouses, soft gold accessories, and vintage leather flats. My look was deliberate, professional, understated, quietly powerful. It was how I claimed space without having to shout. Growing up, I was often called pretty but impractical, emotional, moody, self-absorbed, all the words used to describe a woman who refused to contort herself to fit the roles assigned to her. I have one sister. Her name is Leah Monroe, and she is 27 years old. She is the golden child, the star, the daughter who did everything right. Leah was the straight-A student, the medical school prodigy, the quiet churchgoer who volunteered with hospice patients and brought gluten-free cupcakes to bake sales. She now works as a dermatologist at a private clinic in San Diego and is about to marry Dr. Evan Halberg, a plastic surgeon from a wealthy family with country club memberships and a ski cabin in Aspen. From the outside, it looks like the perfect match. Evan is handsome, soft-spoken, and unfailingly polite. He's also the kind of man my parents always dreamed Leah would land, respectable, successful, and from money. My parents, Meredith and Charles Monroe, have always made it clear that Leah was the family investment. From ballet lessons to SAT prep, they poured everything into her while reminding me to be less intense and more manageable. They supported her unconditionally and questioned every decision I made. When I chose to major in design instead of business, my mother said, "You'll regret chasing beauty over stability." When I landed my first major solo project, My father asked how long I thought it would last before clients realized I was too emotional to manage a team. No matter what I accomplished, it was treated like a temporary phase, something I would eventually abandon when I came to my senses. Leah, by contrast, could fail a test and still be praised for her effort. She could break down from stress and be called delicate. If I cried, I was dramatic. If I succeeded, it was luck. If Leah succeeded, it was destiny. Despite everything, I kept trying. I kept showing up at holidays with thoughtful gifts. I helped pay for Leah's graduation photoshoot. I designed a pro bono waiting room for my father's office. I cooked meals for my mother after her surgery. I played the role of dutiful daughter, believing that if I gave enough, they would finally see me. But it was never enough. And still, I loved them. Still, I tried to forgive the slights, to give them the benefit of the doubt, to believe that perhaps one day they would stop viewing my existence as a threat to Leah's spotlight. 2 months before the wedding, Leah called to ask if I would be a bridesmaid. Her voice was strained, like the words cost her. She didn't say she wanted me there. She said, "It would look bad if you weren't in the photos." I agreed, not out of obligation, but out of a naive hope that perhaps this milestone could shift things between us. That maybe once she was married and secure in her own path, she would no longer feel the need to compete. I didn't expect affection, but I wanted peace. I prepared everything with care, bought the dress, arranged time off from work, hand-painted a custom jewelry box for her bridal gift. I even offered to help with the venue lighting design as a wedding gift. I wanted to believe there was still a version of sisterhood left between us, buried beneath the years of resentment and rivalry. What I didn't know was that my presence wasn't just unwanted. It was feared. Because no matter how much I tried to fade into the background, Leah and my parents had decided that my beauty, my mere existence, was a threat that needed to be eliminated. And they would go further than I ever imagined to ensure I disappeared. The wedding weekend was held at a luxury resort in Napa Valley, all vineyard views and Tuscan stone walls wrapped in twinkle lights. Leah had chosen it for its exclusivity and the promise of a perfect Instagram backdrop. The bridal party arrived 2 days early to rehearse and relax. I was assigned a suite near the main villa, supposedly out of courtesy but in reality to keep me separate. The message was subtle but unmistakable. Still, I arrived with grace. I wore soft gray dresses and flats, styled my hair in a sleek low twist, and kept my makeup minimal. I made no effort to stand out. During the welcome dinner, I barely spoke unless addressed. I spent most of the evening arranging table flowers and assisting the event planner. I was determined to stay in the background. But even that wasn't enough. At one point during the dinner, Evan's friend Jason, a reconstructive surgeon, struck up a conversation with me. He was charming in an easy, respectful way. He asked about my design work and said he had seen one of my projects in Architectural Digest. "That's impressive," he said genuinely. "You have great presence. Not just in your work, just you." I thanked him politely and changed the subject. My mother was watching. I could feel her gaze burning through me like a laser. And when I turned, I saw Leah standing by the wine table, clutching her champagne glass with trembling fingers and that unmistakable expression, betrayal. That night, I returned to my suite early. I had no idea that my quiet presence at dinner had already triggered a full-blown crisis. According to what I would learn later, Leah had broken down in her mother's arms after guests complimented my dress, my poise, my hair. "She's stealing my attention. She always does. Why can't I have one day?" And my mother, ever the protector of her favorite child's fragile ego, made a decision. One that she had perhaps fantasized about for years but never dared to act on. Until now. Until she felt it was justified. I locked my door that night. Or so I thought. I had left the inner latch undone. I remember being exhausted, emotionally drained from trying to make myself small all evening. I remember brushing my hair a few extra times, tying it with a ribbon. I remember placing my phone on the charger beside the bed and texting Leah one final good night. "I'm happy for you. You deserve all the joy." Then I fell asleep. Somewhere between 2 a.m. and dawn, the door opened. A pair of hands, familiar and cold, parted my hair. A pair of scissors snipped. Methodical. Slow. This wasn't vandalism done in rage. It was surgical. Precise. By the time I stirred, it was done. My phone was gone. My toiletries tampered with. My scarves and accessories removed from the closet. My voice, effectively silenced. When I confronted my parents the next morning, they didn't deny it. My mother simply smiled and said, it had to be done. For Leah, she deserves her moment without competing shadows. My father, ever the silent accomplice, folded his newspaper and added, you'll bounce back. It's just hair. Don't be so dramatic. My knees buckled in the hallway outside their suite. I had never felt so helpless, so unmoored. This wasn't just about appearance. It was about agency. They had entered my room, touched my body, stripped me of control in the most intimate way possible while I slept. It was an act of violation, of humiliation, of deliberate reduction. The act wasn't designed to injure. It was designed to erase. And it worked. When I looked in the mirror, I saw someone who barely resembled herself. But what they didn't realize, what they could never anticipate, was that in taking away what they thought defined me, they had accidentally revealed what truly did. My resolve, my fury, my ability to think with clarity even in ruin. They hadn't destroyed me. They had awakened something far more dangerous, the version of me that no longer cared about keeping the peace. The hours that followed were a blur of enforced compliance and quiet rage. I wasn't allowed to leave the premises. My car keys and phone were still missing. When I asked for them, my mother smiled sweetly and said they were being held for everyone's emotional safety. She spoke as if I were a liability, a ticking bomb rather than the daughter who had been violated. I was ushered to an emergency hair appointment with a stylist they had prearranged. She took one look at my butchered scalp and gasped. My mother interjected before I could speak. She got gum stuck in her hair. Tried to fix it herself. Teenager behavior. The stylist, to her credit, didn't press. She worked carefully, quietly, salvaging what she could into a short pixie cut. When we were alone for a brief moment, I asked her gently, if anyone asks, will you tell the truth? Her eyes met mine in the mirror. She nodded, her face pale. I knew she had sensed what had really happened. This wasn't a haircut. It was a message. Back at the bridal suite, my bridesmaid dress had been mysteriously altered, now a size too big, hanging on my frame like a punishment. The makeup artist, sensing something was off, attempted to apply a more dramatic look to enhance my now exposed features. My mother stepped in immediately. Natural for Adrian, she instructed. Light powder. No eye makeup. Maybe just lip balm. She doesn't need to draw attention. Every decision, every micro-interaction, was curated to render me invisible. At the church, I was placed at the far edge of the group, posed behind taller bridesmaids, and quietly removed from as many photos as possible. During the ceremony, Leah glowed. She was radiant, euphoric, not because she was in love, but because she had won. In every sideways glance she threw at me, I saw it, the victory of a girl who had convinced the world that her sister's presence was a threat to her identity. And now that threat had been neutralized. Or so she thought. By the time we arrived at the reception, I had stopped feeling humiliated. The shame had calcified into clarity. I moved through the crowd like a ghost, smiling when expected, offering polite nods, collecting observations. I was no longer the accommodating sister. I was a strategist. I watched as Sarah, the wedding coordinator, floated through the venue with a ring of master keys attached to her clipboard. I saw the gift table, where Leah's wedding night lingerie was subtly labeled in a separate white box. I saw the labeled luggage tags for the honeymoon trip to Bali, carefully grouped behind the staff table. I memorized every detail, and I began to plan. During the father-daughter dance, I slipped away and found Mark, Jason's cousin, Evan's younger brother, and perhaps the only person who had looked at me that day without pity or judgment. I need a favor, I said simply. My parents took my phone. I need to get a few things. Can you drive me to the pharmacy? He didn't hesitate. Of course. We left without anyone noticing. At the 24-hour store, I picked up a bottle of invisible itching powder, a basic sewing kit, double-sided tape, and a small pair of scissors. What's this for? Mark asked cautiously. I paused. I promise it's nothing dangerous. No one will be hurt. But they won't forget. He nodded and offered no further questions. As we returned, he handed me his business card with his personal number written on the back. If you need backup, or just someone to talk to after the dust settles, call me. The first phase of my plan began with the bridal suite. I approached Sarah with calm confidence. Leah asked me to add a few surprise touches for Evan tonight, I said. You know how she loves sentimental gestures. Sarah beamed. Of course. So sweet of you. She handed me her master key and said I had 15 minutes. That was more than enough. Inside the suite, I moved quickly. I opened the white box on the bed, retrieved the silk lingerie, and delicately treated the lining with the clear solution. It would dry invisible and only activate with body heat. Then I moved to their luggage. A few choice garments, swimsuits, undergarments, workout clothes, received the same treatment. I swapped the waterproof mascara in Leah's cosmetic bag for a nearly identical tube that wasn't waterproof. I snapped photos of their original plane tickets, which I would later use to create duplicates with a time change. And finally, I placed a tiny wireless camera in the room's corner, angled only toward the bed, just enough to capture the reaction, not violate their privacy. I returned the key to Sarah with a thank you and a warm smile. The next stage was digital. I borrowed a bridesmaid's unattended phone during dinner and used my memory of Leah's typical password format to log into her cloud storage. It worked. There, I found the official wedding photos already uploaded from earlier in the day. I downloaded the most flattering ones, edited a few, and began scheduling social media posts using her account. Each caption was written to sound subtly arrogant. Feeling like the most stunning bride in the history of weddings. Sorry to all the other girls who just didn't measure up. I also accessed her email and scheduled a series of messages to go out during her honeymoon, including one anonymous email to her employer, highlighting discrepancies in her resume. Nothing malicious, just enough to trigger an internal review. As the night wore on and Leah and Evan left the reception amid rose petals and applause, I stood quietly in the background. My mother gave me a quick glance, her expression cautious. I hope you're not planning anything foolish, she whispered. Wouldn't dream of it, I replied, calm and hollow. I've accepted my place. That seemed to satisfy her. She turned away before she could see the spark in my eyes. I didn't say goodbye to anyone. Instead, I called a rideshare and went to a hotel I had booked discreetly under a different name using the same bridesmaid's phone. There, I spent the early hours of the morning completing the digital elements of my plan. I created a duplicate set of plane tickets using the photos I had taken and changed the departure time to 3 hours later. I emailed them to the hotel's business center with instructions to print and deliver them to the bridal suite the next morning. I scheduled the edited wedding photos to post automatically at staggered intervals throughout Leah's first day in Bali. I also finished compiling a short video montage of the reception, featuring audio snippets from my mother and Leah laughing about my haircut and making veiled comments about silencing me for the wedding's sake. I didn't release it yet. It was my insurance. At 2:37 a.m., the hidden camera in the bridal suite sent an alert to my burner email account. I opened the feed and saw Leah writhing on the bed, scratching furiously. Her hands clawed at the silk lingerie. Her face contorted in confusion and distress. Evan appeared moments later, pulling at his collar, rubbing his arms. I couldn't hear the sound, but I didn't need to. I saw Leah mouth something like, "It burns." I saw the panic as they pulled off the sheets. Examined the garments, rang hotel management. Within an hour, they had changed rooms. Their wedding night was ruined. The next morning, at 8:43 a.m., Leah messaged the bridesmaid group chat. Emergency. Our tickets are wrong. Airport says we're scheduled for 1:00 p.m. but our email says 10:00. We missed the flight. I smiled and turned off the notifications. Throughout the day, her social media posts continued, drawing puzzled reactions from her followers. Are you okay? Did someone hack you? You sound different. Meanwhile, back at home, whispers were spreading. The hairstylist had shared what really happened with a few close friends. And those friends were talking. My cousin messaged me privately. Is it true what they did to your hair? That's sick. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The silence spoke volumes. By day 3 of their honeymoon, Leah was still messaging the bridesmaid group with updates that read more like a descent into chaos. She described mysterious rashes, swollen eyes, red welts that appeared mid-afternoon and flared up at night, blaming Bali's humidity or the hotel's laundry detergent. They had visited a local pharmacy twice, cancelled a snorkeling excursion, and were now spending more time in the room than outside. The social media posts I had scheduled, awkward selfies, captions dripping with vanity, continued to populate her feed like a carefully timed metronome of self-sabotage. One post showed her squinting into the sun with uneven eyeliner and the caption, "Honestly, no one warned me that being this beautiful would be exhausting." Another included a filtered photo of Evan with the tag, "Marrying up never felt so good." Leah's friends began commenting less and messaging more. "Something's off, girl. You okay? Need me to check on your account?" Meanwhile, the anonymous email I had sent to Leah's employer, a short note suggesting a discrepancy between her stated graduation date and official records, had done its job. Mark called me on day 5. He sounded half amused, half stunned. "I don't know what you did," he said, "but Evan just called my parents in a full spiral. Their luggage got lost, Leah is crying nonstop, and apparently her boss asked for a meeting when she gets back. There's also something about weird social posts?" He paused. "I'm not saying I approve of sabotage. But I can't lie, it's kind of brilliant. And deserved." I thanked him for calling. He added, "You still in town? Want to grab dinner when I get back?" I smiled. Maybe. Back home, the fallout had begun to spread through our extended family and social circles. The hairstylist, Marina, had not kept quiet. She had told the truth to several people, describing my mother's version of events as clearly fabricated and deeply troubling. I received tentative messages from my cousin Rachel, from an old family friend, even from my mother's bridge partner. "Are you okay? I always knew your mom was intense, but this is something else." Still, I didn't respond. I knew the silence was louder. It forced them to sit in discomfort without a path to absolution. My father left me 2 voicemails. One was defensive, "Your little stunt is embarrassing this family." The second was more pleading, "We need to talk. I think people are getting the wrong idea." My mother sent a gift card to a salon with a note that read, "Thought you might enjoy something fresh after the wedding stress." The tone deafness made me laugh out loud. The video montage I had created, with clips of whispered conversations and snide comments, remained unreleased. I didn't need it yet. But it sat there, encrypted in cloud storage, ready to detonate should they ever try to spin the story in public or accuse me of lying. I wasn't afraid of their retaliation anymore. They had burned through every ounce of credibility with scissors in the night. They had weaponized their love, and now they would sit in the wreckage of its consequences. 1 week after Leah returned from her honeymoon, itchy, exhausted, humiliated, I received a single text. "I know it was you. I can't prove it, but I know." I never replied, not out of cowardice, but clarity. She didn't deserve the dignity of a response. She didn't deserve access to the version of me they had tried to silence. I had outgrown them, all of them, and now that my hair was gone, I could finally see them clearly. Instead of returning to Portland immediately, I extended my stay in Northern California and rented a small cabin near Big Sur. There, surrounded by cliffs and fog and the sound of waves, I began to write. Not about revenge, but about patterns, boundaries, survival. I chronicled the difference between forgiveness and release, between silence and peace. When I finally returned home, I didn't go back to the same apartment. I had already packed my things before the wedding and had been quietly preparing to leave. I moved into a sunlit loft overlooking the river, started accepting new clients, and gave myself permission to live without the lingering shame of family expectation. I hadn't changed. I had returned to myself. Their violence didn't break me, it removed the last illusion that I was ever safe in their hands. And that clarity became my armor. The truth didn't set me free. Knowing I owed them nothing did. 6 months passed. My hair had grown into a sharp, layered bob, intentional, elegant, and more powerful than anything I had worn before. The old version of me, the one who wore long waves as a soft shield, who smiled to keep the peace, who shrank to avoid stealing light, was gone. In her place stood a woman who understood that beauty wasn't what made her dangerous. It was obedience, and I had stopped obeying. I moved to Seattle, accepting a position with a boutique architecture firm that valued creative leadership over conformity. The team treated me as a collaborator, not a threat. In the evenings, I worked on a manuscript, a blend of memoir and manifesto, about family systems, survival, and the subtle art of reclaiming your voice. I called it They Cut My Hair But Not My Voice. It was less about hair and more about awakening. About how betrayal doesn't break us, it reveals who we are when there's nothing left to lose. Mark and I kept in touch. His initial invitation for dinner had turned into frequent visits, shared hikes, and late-night calls about everything and nothing. He never asked me to retell the wedding story. He didn't need the details. He had seen enough to know the shape of the wound, and he never once tried to fix me. Instead, he listened. He celebrated my wins and respected my silence. When I shared a draft of my manuscript with him, he said simply, "You turned pain into legacy." That's rarer than justice. His presence was never a rescue. It was a partnership. A reminder that love, when done right, doesn't cost you your identity. My family, predictably, tried to re-enter my life in trickles. A holiday card here. A group email about a family reunion there. None of it addressed what they had done. None of it carried even the hint of real accountability. I responded to nothing. Not to punish, but to protect. Silence had become my strongest boundary. And boundaries, I learned, were not cruelty. They were clarity. The only message that struck a different chord came from my mother on the one-year anniversary of the wedding. It was a simple email. No gifts. No defense. Just words. "I've been seeing someone at church, a counselor. She's helping me understand that what I did to you was wrong. I won't make excuses. I genuinely believed I was protecting Leah. But now I see how much I damaged you. I don't expect you to forgive me. I only wanted to say I know I crossed a line I can never uncross." I read it 3 times, waiting for the guilt trip that never came. It wasn't full redemption, but it was the closest thing to truth she had ever offered me. After a full day of reflection, I replied with one sentence, "Thank you for acknowledging the harm." That's a first step. I owed her no more. That single act of recognition did not erase the past. But it did mark a crack in the wall. Not every relationship must be rebuilt. Some must be buried so something better can grow. And in that growth, we don't owe anyone access. We only owe ourselves the truth. As I stood one spring morning on my balcony, looking out over the gray water and the slow glide of ferries crossing Puget Sound, I ran my fingers through my new hair and smiled. They thought cutting my hair would break me. What they didn't know was that they had freed the version of me they feared most, the one who didn't need them. The one who had nothing left to prove. The one who finally understood that the greatest revenge is not destruction. It's peace. I've come to believe that the most dangerous myths we inherit are not the ones about the world, but the ones about family. That they will always love you, always want what's best for you, that their harm comes from good intentions. Sometimes that's true, but sometimes, family is where the first betrayal happens. Sometimes, the ones who are supposed to protect you are the first to diminish you because your light casts a shadow they cannot stand. It took me over 30 years to stop apologizing for existing in that light. In the months since the wedding, I've received dozens of messages from strangers who read my writing, who found me through private forums or heard whispers of what happened. Their stories echoed mine: sisters erased, daughters dismissed, women shamed for their brightness, their beauty, their refusal to dim. Some were still inside those homes, still cutting pieces off themselves to keep the peace. Others were clawing their way out. And some, like me, had finally drawn the line and walked away. To each of them, I said what no one had ever said to me: you don't have to earn kindness. You don't have to trade silence for belonging. You don't have to be loyal to cruelty just because it calls itself love. There is life beyond betrayal. A real one. One where your voice is not a threat but a compass. One where your reflection in the mirror isn't a battleground but a reunion. When Mark and I stood in front of a small circle of friends on our wedding day, in a garden filled with wild poppies and old cedar trees, I wore no veil. No extensions. No manufactured image of purity. I wore my bob, sleek and deliberate. I wore the smile of a woman who had nothing to hide. I didn't invite my parents or Leah. Not out of vengeance, but out of wisdom. The table we built for joy had no place for people who had tried to erase me. Some absences are not wounds. They're boundaries finally honored. That night, before falling asleep beside the man who had seen my brokenness and never flinched, I whispered thank you to the version of me who had once stood in front of a bathroom mirror, hair butchered, hope hanging by a thread, and chose not to break. I hope she knows what she started. I hope she sees that the line they crossed became the line I drew. I hope she's proud. And to anyone still living in fear of taking up space, your existence is not an apology. Let them be uncomfortable. Let them shift in your light. Let them watch you grow. Because healing is not hiding. And your power, once claimed, will never belong to them again.